I'm going to show you how to create a jungle painting using acrylic paint in the style of Henri Rousseau.
If you're new to my channel, please support me by subscribing and be sure to check out all of the other amazing art videos, art lessons, and art tutorials on my channel, Rainbow Parrot Art.
Henri Rousseau was a French post-impressionist painter who lived from 1844 to 1910. He was a self-taught artist with no formal training, and he didn't start painting seriously until he was in his 40s. Amazingly, art legend Pablo Picasso discovered Henri Rousseau and is largely responsible for promoting his work and furthering his career. Rousseau is best known for a style of art called naive art, or primitivism. I think his art naturally looked primitive and folk art-like because he had no formal training. This style was primarily expressed through a series of whimsical and fanciful jungle scenes. While he never left France during his lifetime, he liked to imagine what distant tropical lands might look like. He would travel to local botanical gardens in Paris to look at the plants and get inspiration for his paintings. Some of Rousseau's most notable paintings include
A Carnival Evening, Tiger in a Tropical Storm, Sleeping Gypsy, The Hungry Lion Throws Itself on an Antelope, and The Merry Jesters. I'm basing today's painting on Rousseau's 1910 painting called Exotic Landscape with Lion and Lioness in Africa. To get started, I'm grabbing an 11 by 14 inch piece of multimedia paper. I'm using painter's tape to tape down my paper, but this is optional. You can find links to all the materials I'm using in the description below. I want to make light colors for my background, so I'm adding the white acrylic paint in a few different places on my paper plate, then adding some dark blue, dark green, light blue, yellow, and plain white. Then I'm going to grab my 1-inch flat brush and start mixing some light blue, which I'm going to use in the upper part of the sky. I'm dipping my brush in water because when I add water to my paint, it blends more smoothly. I'm wanting to switch colors, so I'm going to grab a paper towel, then gently pinch and windshield wipe my brush to get the extra paint off. I like to dip my brush in the water and then repeat this a couple of times. This will prevent all of this paint from getting washed down the drain, and it will also help keep my cup of water clean. I'm grabbing a smaller flathead brush to mix some yellow and white, but you can use whatever size brush works for you. I'm adding this light yellow just below my blue paint because I want it to look like a sunset. I'm continuing to add water to my paintbrush so that the paint will blend more smoothly. I'm especially adding water where I want the blue and the yellow paint to blend together. Now I'm mixing a color that's mostly yellow with a bit of green in it. I'm going to add this color next. For the bottom area, I'm mixing a color using blue, green, brown, and white. Don't worry if your colors don't match mine. Just play around with mixing the colors, experiment, and have fun. This color looks a bit dark to me, so while my paint is still wet, I'm grabbing some white paint and layering it right on top. I'm also adding a bit of water to my brush to help the colors blend more smoothly. Now that I've got the background finished, I'm ready to start painting the jungle. I'm grabbing a super tiny brush and adding a bit of water to some green color that I already mixed. This water thins out the paint so that I can easily paint a smooth, thin, narrow stem. Now I'm carefully painting some thin leaves onto the stem. I'm going to add another stem and repeat. Remember, you will need to mix some water into your acrylic paint in order to be able to make these thin, tiny brush strokes. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more long stems with skinny leaves. I like to experiment with using slightly different colors of green. I'm adding a different kind of plant here, one with a stem and long, skinny leaves like a palm. Now for another long, skinny stem. This time I'm using brown to make a stem, This plant will have slightly shorter leaves and branches with more leaves on them. You can use your imagination to come up with all different styles of plants. You can layer your plants right on top of each other to make your jungle look more dense. I'm using a very light green color to paint a few more fern-like plants. Now adding leaves to this big long stem. I'm making the branches of a long skinny tree and then adding little leaves with stems attached to the branches. Again, I want to remind you that you can get this level of detail by using a tiny brush and adding a bit of water to your paint. Remember to use a variety of different green colors for your plants. This will make your jungle look more realistic. Here, I'm adding a long brown stem, then painting some ellipse-shaped leaves on it. I first paint the shape of the leaf, then I fill it in with color. These will be the trunks of my banana trees. I'm putting a couple dark green shrubs here in the corner, then adding a few snake-like plants growing on top. I'm mixing a few new green colors. These colors have different ratios of yellow and blue. And from there, I'm going to make even more colors, adding bits of red, brown, and white. I'm using one of my new colors to add some leaves onto the banana trees. I'm also adding a few more palm plants. I love how these dark ferns stand out in contrast to the lighter plants in the background. These are going to turn into stems for flowers. And this is a super spiky plant. And now for a few more palm branches. Or maybe these are ferns, I'm not really sure. I'm using light green and a bit of white to make the snaky plant in the foreground. I honestly don't even know what this blue area is. I think it might be a waterfall. I'm adding some bits of white on top. I'm grabbing some tan, brown, and black to make a lion. It will be easier to paint your lion if the paint underneath is already dry. I'm roughly rendering the shape of the lion. Don't worry about making it perfect. I'm just adding the head and shoulders. The rest of the body will be hiding behind the plants. As you can see, I've used a darker brown on my male lion, and I'm going back and adding some details on the face. Now I'm painting a few plants in front of the lions so they look like they're hiding, and a few more plants of varied colors in the foreground. I'm using a light creamy yellow and a light teal color to add tiny blades of grass. I think these look so cool. I know I've said this a bunch already, but be sure to use a teeny tiny brush and mix a bit of water into your paint so that you can also make these teeny tiny thin smooth brush strokes. I've added green, blue, and black to make the dark color for the snake plant. I love this color. I'm going back and adding some yellow highlights. Don't worry about adding highlights, it's totally optional. I'm making a very bushy, greenish gray plant here on the left. Now I'm adding some dark green lines and going back with some lighter highlights. Again, don't worry about adding the highlights unless you want to. Now I'm ready to add the red setting sun. Whether or not you add a sun to your painting is totally up to you. It's a little tricky, so try not to be a perfectionist about making it perfectly round. If you mess it up, just work with your mistake. I'm ready to add some flowers and bananas. I'm using mostly orange on this flower. I wanted to add yellow for the bananas here, but the color barely shows. So I decided to add some white paint in all the places where I want either bananas or flowers. I waited for this white paint to dry completely. Then I painted yellow circles where the bananas are. I went back with streaks of orange to make the individual bananas pop out a bit more. I'm using a couple different shades of pink and white to paint these flowers. I am so excited about how my painting turned out. When you're finished, slowly remove the tape if you use tape, and be sure not to tear your painting. I hope you love how your jungle painting turns out. When you do a painting like this, it's always fun to go back and compare your painting to the original. What do you think? If you want to keep improving your painting skills, be sure to check out this tutorial I made on how to paint Monet's water lilies.